much life in the ocean, even life underground. We were right to some happiness when it's found. I'm not strong like I used to be. I'm often wrong. I'm often scared that you'll be gone when you can see. I'm not what I claim to be. I'm not anything that's good. This could be paradise. Yes, this could be paradise. There's so much life in the ocean, living life without sound. Imagine life without music to be found. If I was scared when you called to me right from the start, there was darkness in the sky and in my heart. But if the earth is pulled apart, I'm still yours for good. This could be paradise. Yes, this could be paradise. It's just a moment, this life ain't never ending. Pages keep on turning themselves. Daylight turns to darkness, the darkness turns to nothing, and nothing turns in on itself. This could be paradise. Yes, this could be paradise. There's so much life in the ocean, living life without sound. Imagine life without music to be found. It's just a moment, this life ain't never ending. Pages keep on turning themselves. The daylight turns to darkness, the darkness turns to nothing, and nothing turns in on itself. Round and 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 round and
Afternoon, everybody. The good news is there'll be a new chairman for the next session, and he's not from Cork. So I'd welcome Andy O'Donoghue, who's a technology journalist, to talk us through the Innovation Awards. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Also, as it happens, I am from Cork. I went to An Monaiste Huig, so, you know. However, we'll get started. And last year's winner of the Innovation Award happens to be beside me, and was also, Conor is CEO of Acara Robotics. But Acara is a company that I had heard about before you won the award. I've heard about it since. I met you very briefly last year. Now it's great to have a chance and an opportunity to talk to you. Before we talk so much about Acara, though, first of all, it was a Trinity spin-out, I believe.
It was.
And you also have an academic background yourself. So I'm kind of curious about how the spin-out happened. But before it did, how did you arrive as an expert on robotics?
I suppose as an undergraduate student, I studied engineering, and I kind of went in with big aspirations of changing the world and doing all these things. And very quickly, if you do science or engineering, you kind of start to specialize. That becomes the thing. And I was a little bit disillusioned by that. And I came across this really cool initiative where a bunch of folks were building robots to play soccer. And their goal was by 2050, they'd have a team of robot soccer players that would beat the World Cup winning team. And to me, it blew my mind because, it was, almost like the space race was in the 60s, where these people just kind of saw blue sky. And it seemed inevitable that AI would advance in the way in which it has, and it continues to. But really, the next frontier of that is connecting the hardware to it. So I became infatuated at that point. And to me, connecting the dots of like what the technology is to what it could be, that was for me about why it transitioned to healthcare and why I felt so strongly about developing this technology to address what I believe are pretty fundamental issues with our healthcare system, and specifically around labor. And the idea that we can make automation, physically embodied automation, that we can put it in a hospital or in a healthcare setting, and not only can it free up healthcare workers to be able to give the kind of care we'd expect, but also to increase the productivity of the whole workforce. So it kind of took that trajectory of starting with technology, but very quickly transitioning into how can we use it.
Now, that's, as you mentioned, as an undergraduate student, but you kept going. You didn't think that's a nice degree. You stuck at academia for some time.
Well, I would have loved to go into a career. If there was a company like Acara that existed then, there's no way I would have gone into university and stayed there. But the fact of the matter was that it didn't exist. There was only a couple of places that was, you could actually get a job doing it. And even in those places, you had what I perceived to be old, stuck in the mud professors who were sort of, not really, they weren't really of the modern era. They hadn't kind of come up through the AI wave that I had started to see. So a lot of the really cool innovations that I was seeing coming through were being done by PhD students. They're being done by people much earlier in their careers. So doing a PhD and sort of, using that as an exploratory start to figure out where I could add the most value, and I found the timing was actually ideal in Trinity because they were in the process of shaping their kind of AI and robotics programs. So I found myself in the right place at the right time there.
Very good. And then you lectured for some time?
Yeah, thankfully, when my PhD finished, I was kind of given a bit of a unique opportunity because there was a professor who had taken an eternal job in Trinity as the Dean of Students. And there was a short-term academic position that kind of opened up, and thankfully they picked me to fill it. It started out as a 2-year contract, then it evolved into a 3 or 4 year contract, and then I managed to get a 10-year position at the end of it. So it kind of, I guess, luck favoured me for those few years. And then once I reached that point, we'd build a research team. A lot of the research we'd been doing at that stage had started to reach the point where we felt it could leave the lab.
Okay.
And really, that was what kind of was the catalyst to form Acara.
Okay. And the research at that point, is that what turned into Acara?
No. So actually, we were going after a very different problem. So back in kind of 2017 through 2019, we were working with Enterprise. We got funding from Enterprise Ireland to build a robot for nursing homes. And the opportunity we saw there was that you know, a lot of older people who were in nursing homes, their quality of life really wasn't what we'd like it to be. And people viewed nursing homes as a place where you go when you can't live independently yourself long enough. And having spent a lot of time there, you know, in 2019, I actually lived in a nursing home for 3 months. So I gained fundamental understanding as to, you know, the lived experience of not just the nursing home residents, but also the staff there. And actually seeing if we could build a robot that could go in and just, you know, do some of the heavy lifting. And ironically, not things that you think, not things like making beds or anything like that, actually social things. Like we were able to get robots that could do, like, you know, help with group singing. Like music is amazing, has amazing therapeutic effects, but like if you've got a, you know, where we were in the States, we had a lot of Mexican staff, like they wouldn't feel comfortable leading a singing session, but we could build a robot that did, you know, and then what ended up happening was that like these sessions, we were getting like oversubscribed. Like we had a situation where like the robots speakers weren't projecting loud enough to fill the room, and like we had to figure that out. We had scenarios where like, you know, residents of the nursing home were inviting their family in out of hours, which kind of, you know, all of a sudden the front desk was being overwhelmed with people outside of their normal visiting hours. And like all of these weird things that we didn't see coming. We brought it to places where dementia patients were, and seeing them respond in ways in which like it blew the minds of the people who were there. And then COVID hit. So we built this amazing trajectory. Our work at the time actually featured on the cover of Time magazine, which was a shock to all of us. But then COVID hit, and overnight the idea of a social robot that could, you know, increase social group activities was frowned upon. But thankfully, we'd done enough on the robotics front to be able to pivot that. And what we did was we found a way to leverage the robotics piece with some of the research we'd been doing around disinfection. And we found a way to clean hospitals much, much faster and to a higher standard than was currently the case. And this kind of segued us into a whole new area where of improving efficiency of our frontline health services. And that's kind of what Cara has since really been focusing on, is really helping hospitals do more. It's helping the staff be more productive, helping reduce downtime in key clinical areas. And the hope we have is that, you know, the hospital can do more procedures, the staff have less pressure, and the patients have access to better and safer care.
Okay, so that's we've arrived at where Cara are now, and without asking you about new products and new directions, we won't kind of nibble at that too much. But just explain to us, there's kind of some core components to what Cara do and what makes it work.
Yeah, well, like I think we've come on a bit of a journey, and entering the market during COVID was challenging because it was so tumultuous, and like there was a lot of stuff that was happening in healthcare systems that was outside the norm. So then there was the whole kind of getting through COVID and back to normal. Since then, we've had a chance to kind of get our heads up and figure out what we think makes sense. So a typical journey with us actually doesn't start with robots. It starts with helping hospitals better understand their key clinical areas. At the moment, this is really challenging. Understanding like what happens in an operating room throughout the day is actually something that at the moment it varies depending on who you ask. So the first thing we do is we help hospitals actually get objective data and much higher resolution than they're currently getting. We do that by installing a sensor that's effectively the eyes and ears. So we can, using AI, figure out how long these rooms are out of action.
And that's a sensor on the,
Yeah, it will be, we haven't said or launched this publicly yet, but that's essentially what it is. We've built in a lot of, features to make it something that is not GDPR. It doesn't pose issues for GDPR or privacy. It's something that we can pull a lot of insights. That's probably a better way to describe it. And then once we have that data, we can kind of understand like which areas of the hospital have the best opportunity for us to free up. And it's not uncommon for us to see a room that, there's probably 2 hours plus of downtime in a day that could be, through improving efficiency, freed up to do more things. And really that's the second and third stage is helping hospitals, working with them to figure out, well, now that we have this data and we have the ability to continue to generate it and collect it, how do we actually empower you to be able to use it better? And it's really at that stage that the robot gets introduced, along with a few other technologies, as a way of streamlining things.
It must be, procurement is difficult in the health sector. Everybody here knows that. But it must be difficult in a sense for procurement managers to know what Cara are coming with. So how do you deal with acceptance, particularly of radically new innovation?
That's a really great point. One of the key things we've done is we've started to work, not just in Ireland, but in other countries. So we had the opportunity, about this time last year, we got accepted into a digital health accelerator that's run in London by the NHS. So that's been a great way, that's been a great entry point to us, because that allowed us to work directly with procurement systems. And we saw firsthand that actually there was, especially with some of the public health systems, like traditionally they'd buy us either as a CapEx piece or a service piece, but like depending on what we were offering, the robot would be CapEx, but maybe the data would be OpEx. There's all kinds of complexities that were there, and like, to be frank, we found it challenging to sell into those systems. So that sort of led us to focus a little bit more on the US, where thankfully those issues don't really exist.
Okay.
We're selling directly to the hospital. They have innovation programs that there's a lot of precedent there for different business models. It's actually something they quite like. So our hope is that we can maybe establish and grow our customer base there, and then once we have the proof of concept, we can bring it back here and other places.
It must be incredibly attractive, though, when you get to that procurement stage. Some rooms in hospitals are incredibly expensive to run, to fit out, so operating theatres and the likes. They must look at a car and think, okay, this could transform the way that this entire hospital works.
We tick a lot of boxes, because like fundamentally when we speak to hospitals, especially ones in the US or private ones, like the first thing they want to know is, will this allow us to make more money? Can we do more procedures? Secondly, can it reduce costs? Thirdly, like, will it solve a headache? And fourth, is it good for patients? Unfortunately, it's usually that order. And what we're able to do is kind of go in and say, yes, it'll do all of the above. And, it's also not specific to any particular type of procedure. Like, we work just as well in, orthopedic surgery as we will in pediatrics. So it's something that kind of moves across specialities. And we're starting to get kind of brought into conversations outside of hospitals. Actually, architects who are building new hospitals are now reaching out to us and asking, is this kind of infrastructure something that we can factor into the commissioning of future hospitals? And, thinking about how hospitals can become robot-proof sounds like a foreign idea, but the reality is that, I think we're on track. The number of healthcare shortage we have it's in the millions. So having the ability to offload low-value tasks, like moving things across a hospital, like this is the job of a robot.
Yeah.
Like I remember there was I won't name it. There was a hospital here in Ireland where I was working, and I spoke to a porter, and he told me that based on his Fitbit data, that he walked more on a day he did more steps in a day than he did on the weekend when he played 18 holes of golf. So
wow.
When people are not freed up to do things like that, like they're not helping, they're not doing what they're doing best, and I think that there's a need for physically embodied artificial intelligence technology that we should be allowed to hand over some of the less desirable tasks to, and I think it'll hopefully improve staff morale, it'll boost retention, and lead to a better outcome for patients. Yeah,
very good. Finally, I just want to ask you, you won this award last year. It's been a busy one by the sound of it, and we were chatting earlier about visa requirements and travel to the US and everything that you're doing. So what does the next year look like for you, apart from travel chaos?
It's a really exciting time for us. I think we've been at the point now where we've done a huge amount of kind of code design with hospitals. We've been very careful to make sure that what we're selling is something that can integrate with workflow, and we didn't want to move too quickly. I think we're now at the point where handing the technology over and actually seeing what happens when we step back and let the staff and the hospital run it for themselves. I think that's really the next step for us. So we have a couple of agreements that we haven't formally announced yet, but hopefully we will in the next couple of months. And we're just looking forward to seeing the kind of impact it can make, and hopefully there's opportunities for us to become a permanent presence in some of these places.
Very good. It's a remarkable story, Conor. Thanks for telling it. It's great to see you. We look forward to catching up with you next year with the award. And it's also a remarkable company. Congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, Conor McGinn.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Conor.
Cheers.
Thanks, Emil. So we have, we're going to move on, and it's fantastic. We have the three finalists. Guys, if you want to come up and grab a chair, and we'll introduce them in a minute. So the three companies, which are Semantic Medical, Inthelia Therapeutics, and LEP or LEP? LEP. LEP Biomedical. We're short one person. We're not. Okay, guys, grab a seat. Okay, Alan, we'll start with you. Introduce yourself and your company.
Sure. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan Ibbotts. I'm the CEO and founder of LEP Biomedical. And we are a pharma company focused on glaucoma drainage surgeries. These surgeries fail as much as 40% by year one, driven by the eye's preponderance towards excessive inflammation and scar tissue, and also driven by the fact that patients have to take anti-inflammatory eye drops as much as every 2 hours from 1 to 3 months onwards. So there's a huge human element here. And we also want to address the inequalities within glaucoma as well. It's not an equal opportunities disease. People of Afro-Caribbean origin are more predisposed to scarring and may inhabit socioeconomic groups in certain countries that are more challenged. For example, in Philadelphia, one of the centers of excellence we spoke to, about 30% of the patients are below the poverty line. So ensuring that patients are continuously taking their anti-inflammatories adds to a well-being for the health economic system as well. So we're trying to, essentially our mantra is to bring value to all stakeholders across the patient, the surgeon and the payer. So we're trying to fix things.
Very, very good. Steve, Intellia Therapeutics.
Good afternoon. So my name is Steve Kerrigan. I am co-founder, CSO of Intellia Therapeutics. And our company is looking to revolutionize the treatment options for the world's biggest killer, which is called sepsis. Currently, there are 50 million cases of sepsis throughout the world, with 11 million deaths each year. So there's no doubt that sepsis is a global health crisis. We can take that a little step further if you look deeper into the statistics. We can see that COVID over the last 4 years has killed 8 million people. In the exact same period, 44 million people have died from sepsis. COVID was a pandemic. Sepsis is a pandemic in waiting. Our company is, the current treatment options for sepsis is predominantly antibiotics. We're all very much aware of the significant failure of antibiotics in the world right now. And if we don't do something soon, we're going to have no treatment options for sepsis at all. Our drug, our solution to this is a host-targeted therapy. And this is a drug that acts on the host, thereby reducing any risks of resistance. And we're hoping to save millions of lives in the process.
Very good. And Stephen and Semantic Medical.
Best for last. So we're Semantic Medical. We're developing computer vision-based medical devices for real-time tissue assessment for diagnostic and surgical oncology procedures. So whether it's you're undergoing a biopsy or you're far along and you're having a tumor removed, you have this problem where you don't find out the success of that procedure for a number of days or weeks later when the final pathology comes back. And as we know, Conor was talking about it just there, with healthcare shortages, a lot of hospitals don't even have on-site pathology, so you're talking weeks or potentially months. So the main problem is that, say, and depending on the procedure type and the cancer type, it can be up to a quarter of biopsy procedures and up to 35% of cancer surgeries are affected by this. So our device is essentially made, it's about the size of a desktop printer, and it sits in the procedure room or the operating theatre, and the excised tissue can be put into our device, and it's analysed, our proprietary models are run over it, and then feedback is immediately given back to the team so they can know whether they need to remove more tissue, take additional biopsies. They can do that in the original procedure. So obviously, in those quarter of biopsies, or up to 35% of surgeries, you generally have to repeat the procedure if it's been unsuccessful or incomplete. So this is obviously adds huge risk to the patient, delays diagnosis and treatment. It adds massive costs to the payers, and it's a real pain point for physicians. They don't like being told that they failed at something. So yeah.
Okay. Three companies doing incredibly good work, serious problems and challenges for the people that you're essentially working for, the patients and those providing care for them. But from an innovation perspective, let's just talk for a minute about your companies. And I suppose we'll start with you, Alan, because we'll go back to glaucoma.
Sure.
The research that led you to this, and then the challenges in launching a company out of it. I'm curious about, research is one thing. We've heard a great story from Connor. Doesn't often happen. So how did you get here, in a sense?
Yeah, so the original genesis for this comes from almost 10 years ago on a chance meeting with a consultant glaucoma surgeon out in the Mater. And we were discussing the problems in the clinic, really. So the problem was always there. And my background is in controlled drug delivery and biomaterials. So it immediately clicked with me that, oh, here, I can do something here. This has got wheels, you know. And, you know, over time, we just started developing prototypes, testing drug release profiles, because for inflammation, you need a lot early, but as anyone who's taken steroids knows, you have to taper off as well. So we had to spend a lot of time developing that drug release profile. So the big win came about 15 months ago. We ran 2 separate animal trials which validated the effect in post-surgery models. So when you have that, and the animal is a higher bar to get over because their ability to repair is actually better than our own.
Okay.
So we knew, okay, now we've got a strong effect case here, a strong proof of concept. It's time to move it into a preclinical runway, which is beyond the scope of a college. So we still have great confidence in what we're doing. So we knew the time was right to spin out. And then you move into the challenges, as you mentioned, about fundraising.
Yeah.
Recruitment, you're learning about reimbursement, coding, and you're learning everything on the fly, but it's kind of the part of the fun,
Sure.
essentially.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it takes a certain personality, maybe, I don't know, but I enjoy it. So you're getting a lot of key opinion leader feedback as well. So you're making sure that, you know, this is a real problem.
Yeah.
And people really want a solution too. So you're not kind of just shoehorning into a busy field. So you're constantly refining, constantly staying on top of what's happening. And it takes a lot of bandwidth, I think, is one of the challenges. So you have to find a great team. I'd say, you know, you're nothing without the team and the support around. And fortunately, Let Biomedical has that.
Sure. And Steve, from your perspective, we'll just move on from what Alan said there. And so that's kind of research and innovation and staying on top of the challenge. Then you get to where you guys are, say, and it becomes a business. What are the challenges for you? Because there's no doubt, you know, sepsis is a huge problem, but will anyone buy this? Will people listen to us? How have you kind of countered that?
Yeah, so this is a huge problem for us because sepsis is known as a graveyard of drug discovery. It's 100 years ago since there was the last drug approved for the use of sepsis, and that was the antibiotic. It cured many, many lives. We're now approaching the post-antibiotic era because these antibiotics are starting to fail. So when we talk to investors, we do come up against that brick wall of this drug is not, or this condition, this disease is not treatable. It's an outcome. It's not really a disease. It's an outcome, and it's a very difficult outcome to have to deal with. And I think that led us back to going, we don't need another antimicrobial. That's not necessary. We have plenty of them there, which led us back to going, maybe there's another way to do this. And we're now looking at a paradigm shift in that to say, leave the bacteria alone. Let's go after the host. Why don't we just tell the host, don't respond to the bacteria? So if you don't respond to the bacteria, it's self-limiting. The immune system will do its job and it will kill it. So now the host is not going to respond. We're not going to get a breakdown of the barriers in the body. We're not going to get spread of infection. And we've looked at this in 2 separate preclinical trials. The first one was pneumonia-induced sepsis, and it had passed. And those animals that eventually had pneumonia didn't get sepsis, or didn't progress to sepsis. And we're currently in a trial right now with COVID-induced sepsis. And again, all indications, that'll finish probably in the next couple of months, all indications show that there's no lung injury associated after we treat with our drugs. So from a business model, it's been a real challenge. And there's going to be a challenge of trying to convince people antibiotics or antimicrobials is not the only way to treat infection. Precision medicine is the way forward.
And Stephen, from your perspective, that's an interesting kind of route of the discussion that Steve went down there. Where are you guys now in that commercialization process, and what's next for you?
Yeah, so currently we're undertaking some clinical validation studies. So we've been working with biobanks and some hospitals here in Ireland straight onto human samples, which is quite useful for building up clinical evidence for eventual marketing of the device and for obtaining investment. We're raising a seed round at the moment, hoping to close it later this year. It's a very difficult time to raise seed investment, especially. I've spoken to plenty of investors who'd be, in the Series A, Series B stage, and they're quite interested. But finding those seed investors, especially within Europe, is quite difficult. In Europe, it's quite siloed when it comes to venture capitalists and investors. We have some great VCs and angel syndicates and angel investors here in Ireland. But for example, French VCs only invest in French companies at this stage, German, Central European, Nordic, UK, so on. So that's the challenge at the moment, really, is raising that seed investment to be able to get into these pilot studies and really progress it, so then I can go back to these later stage investors and push forward.
That's a really interesting point, because seed in the last 2 years, particularly, or 2.5 years now, seed's got really difficult. And as for pre-seed, almost, it's cobwebs.
Yeah, so I've been told.
So tell me, are all of you, are Enterprise Ireland backers of all of your companies?
Yeah.
Okay, which is great to hear. Now you're looking for seed. So, and this, Alan or Steve, for you on this one, you've been talking to investors. Has you had the same experience that Stephen has had, or are you at a different stage of fundraising, or where are you there, Steve?
Yeah, so we've talked to many VCs. They're very nervous. They want to de-risk further. We recently, last October, got $1 million non-dilutive funding from the Department of Health and Human Services in the USA, from BARDA. BARDA are their scientific wing, or the biomedical wing of the government over there. So they're funding us right now. We will have the work de-risked by the end of the summer, and then we're ready for our first seed fund investment.
And Alan, you?
Yeah, I think the issue
Similar, or?
seed funding is almost near universal. You
Yeah.
know, the good times ended a couple of years back, and now that people want a more de-risked product, even when they claim seed investment. But there's always ways and means, and for us, our strategy will be we're engaging with the larger players in the field, because our technology doesn't replace their technology, but it just integrates into it. So they have drainage technology that is failing, and we can give life to technologies that may pose challenges in reimbursement in the future. So we don't compete, we just integrate into them. So we look to partner in probably earlier than some may, and to run some proof of concept studies with them, with their support as well. And they have many larger strategics would have venture wings now as well that we look to transfer into.
Have all of you received interest from VCs outside of Ireland? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good sign in that respect. And I presume mostly US, has that been the experience? Yeah.
A little bit of European as well.
A little bit of European, okay. We're just nearly out of time, but I just wanted to ask you, and just brief answers from all or some of you, if you like. We talked about the last year with Akara Robotics. We know the fundraising is going to be difficult. This next year, is it about product? Is it about development? Is it about commercialization? Is it about investment? Everything's going on, but where do you hope to be in a year? Steve?
We want to be in humans. We're hoping we're pre-FDA at the moment, and we hope to have our clinical trial design completed really by September. Our regulators are involved in that heavily, and we hope to be moving towards a clinical trial, phase 2A clinical trial next early Q1 next year.
Fantastic. Alan, you?
Seed funded, obviously, and then up and running with sterile manufacture and well on into our preclinical toxicology. So large animal models, long-term studies for safety.
Very good. And with Symantec, Stephen?
Yeah, similar. We're planning our pre-submission meeting with the FDA later this year. So once they tell us we have all our eggs in a row and we get seed funding, hopefully this time next year we'll have kicked off a pilot study.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna find out which of you has won the Innovation Award this year. And before we do, I just want to say thanks first of all to UPMC, who are our main sponsor. And I also want to say congratulations to the three of you. 3 remarkable companies, potentially, I think, but 3 fantastic ideas with the potential to save and change lives. So that's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, Symantec Medical, Instellia Therapeutics, and LEP Biomedical. Thanks, guys. No, stay where you are. We have, Tom, are you back for this, or? Oh, sorry. It's not Tom, but I'm going to hand over.
I'm not mic'd up, so I'm going to go over here for a moment, if I may. Thanks very much, Andy.
Thanks, Eamon.
So just to echo what Andy has said in terms of the people who invest and take risk to bring what UPMC stands for as our mission, life-changing medicine to people. So the women and men and their significant others who put it all on the line so that we can have opportunities to improve the health indices of the population, be it local, regional or global, is what we're here to celebrate. And the winners here, of course, are going to ultimately be the patients. And the agents and the advocates for the patients winning are the people who are sitting on the stage. But this is the apex of a pyramid, which had a pretty broad base of very skilled and innovative colleagues who were considered as appropriate for the commendation of the award for this year. But the way we currently do it, which is open to review, is that we have a panel that reviews all the applicants and shortlists, and then it ends up with 3 and then 1. And I suppose to just pay respect to people's time, I'll now confirm and announce that Intelia has been chosen as the winner of the Innovation Award for UPMC 2024. A round of applause for our colleagues who did not leave.
Thanks very much. Fair play, Steve. Well done.
In the center, yeah, cool. I'll go down this end and we'll get the guys in the middle. Super, thanks, Emil. Yeah, congratulations, Steve. Well done. Well done. Thanks, Eamon.
So thanks to everybody who stuck with us for the end of the day, but we have an excellent panel, a final panel, and I'd like to call on the first person. The focus is on innovation, and the first person up is Agron Hassani, who's the MD of Medical Affairs and Chief Medical Officer of Novartis. He qualified as a physician in Croatia and shortly afterwards moved to Ireland. He's an Irishman now for the last 17 years. And he works across clinical information, clinical trials, and risk management. And I welcome him to the stage. Thanks, Agron.
So good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here again, this time as a speaker. I've been at this summit multiple times, but this is the first time I'm here as a speaker. So my name is Agron Hassani. As Tom said, I'm the Head of Medical Affairs and Chief Medical Officer at Novartis Ireland. So I've been with Novartis for a long time. For the ones that don't know anything about Novartis, Novartis is a large Swiss headquartered pharmaceutical company. We employ over 950 associates in Ireland. We're the second largest pharma company in the country. So I'm here today to talk to you about innovation. Innovation is, as we heard from the 3 previous Irish startups, very exciting. It's happening every day. It's happening all around us. So my disclaimer is here. I'll start out just by saying I'm not going to go through the disclaimer, but the my views expressed today are my personal views, not the ones of my employer, Novartis. So we are operating in a rapidly evolving ecosystem. There's rapid scientific and technology advances happening on a daily basis, so much that it's very often difficult to keep up with them. There's advances, there's new technologies being introduced on a daily basis, new treatment modalities, you name it. This in itself is posing massive pressures, massive stress on the healthcare system. Systems are under increased financial pressure. Reforms of healthcare system are happening on a daily basis. There's a ripe shortage of physicians, and there's demographic pressures all around us. At the same time, AI continues to advance, to evolve. AI is transforming the science of drug discovery. In full disclosure, this slide is a few months old. Not my deck, only this slide, a few months old. At the time, there were 260 companies involved in AI drug discovery. I checked ChatGPT last night. There's between 400 and 800. It just shows the scale, the evolution of AI drug discovery. There are multiple assets at various stages of clinical development, but including assets that are entering first in human trials, all driven by artificial intelligence. So innovation all around us. But innovation is the ability to see change as an opportunity, not as a threat. We shouldn't view innovation as a threat. Innovation is an opportunity. So, wave of pharmaceutical innovation, our understanding of biology and chemistry has evolved so much that it can be comparable to probably 10, 15 years ago. Regardless of this, or despite this, only 3% of the human proteins are targeted by drugs today. There's roughly 1,800 druggable proteins that are yet not targeted by current drugs. And we also know that roughly 70% of the human transcriptome is composed by non-coding RNAs. So massive learnings, but also at the same time, massive room for improvement. With respect to the drug discovery process, I already alluded that AI is aiding faster drug discovery and development. If we look at a few ways how drug discovery happens, high-throughput screening is a classical way how we screen for new targets. High-throughput screening can screen up to 10,000 compounds a day. The cost is about 1 million per target, but unfortunately, the hit rate is quite low. At the same time, if we look at AI-driven screening, we can screen up to 10 million compounds a day. We can reduce the cost significantly, and the hit rate, fortunately, for patients, for healthcare systems, is significantly higher. There's even a potential for faster decision-making regarding approval and reimbursement of new molecules. We already know that multiple companies are using artificial intelligence to aid them with faster protocol writing, concept sheet writing, and so on. So everything is going in favor of sort of reducing the time to various processes that lead to drug approval. Artificial intelligence needs to augment natural intelligence, and again, not to replace it, as I already alluded. If we move on from drug discovery to the new science of therapeutics, I'll focus briefly on the concept of advanced therapeutics. Advanced therapeutics are basically, as the text on the blue says, are basically treatments that are based on genes and tissue cells. So very briefly, cell therapeutics. What does that mean? It means that we, in some shape or form, try to enhance what our own cells do in order to fight disease. I'll take as an example CAR-T. CAR-T is a therapeutic that has been used in oncology mostly, typically in hematological malignancies. What happens in this treatment modality is we take our own T cells, we take out a number of them in the lab, they get added a synthetic chimeric antigen receptor, which is basically a targeting system with a helmet on it. In the lab, the same cells then grow. When the numbers of CAR T cells are higher, they're reinfused in the body, and now with this enhanced targeting system, they're able to more effectively target cancer cells. There's a few treatments already available, typically once in a lifetime treatment. It's not chronic treatment. You get this treatment once, and a number of hematological malignancies can be targeted this way. Gene therapies, you've probably heard of gene therapies. A few of them are licensed to date. If we take an example, spinal muscular atrophy. Spinal muscular atrophy is a life-limiting, debilitating condition that typically or always happens in newborns. Children, newborns, live very short because of a defective protein. If this defective gene is treated with some of the medicines that are available, it allows children to have almost a normal life. In terms of nuclear medicine, this is a combination of drugs and radioactive substances to treat or to destroy disease. So this is the concept of advanced therapeutics. What does Novartis do, or what has Novartis been doing in the space of more advanced therapeutics? So when we move away from classical, from traditional treatment modalities that we all know of. I'll give you 3 examples here. I'll talk about radioligand therapies. I'll talk about CAR T, but not in oncology, in new indications, but I'll also talk about small interfering RNAs. When it comes to RLT, radioligand therapy, we have used radioactive treatment for a long time to manage patients. Anyone who has a family member with a form of, say, breast cancer or many other cancers knows that patients very often go for radium or radioactive therapy, typically applied very often indiscriminately, especially historically if we go back a few decades. It effectively destroyed cancer cells very often, but it damaged nearby tissue. It had to be applied over a long period of time, large amounts of radiation, a lot of radiation had to be applied to be effective. With radioligand therapies, what we do is we take a radioactive substance, we connect it with a ligand. That ligand is specific only for one cancer cell, one type of cancer cell, say a prostate, a cell that resides, or a cancer cell that resides on the prostate. What that does, so the ligand brings the radioactive element to the cancer cells, it binds, and it gives the cancer cell a boost of radiation, so very often leading to significant improvements in signs and symptoms. Imagine you have a parent, an elderly parent, a family member, a friend, a neighbor who has prostate cancer, and a clinician says to that patient, you have 4 weeks to live. It very often does happen in stage 4 prostate cancer. 4 weeks to live. It's soul-destroying. With this treatment, you have an opportunity, you have a chance to be around longer. There is an example, without going into details, of a celebrity in the UK who has received, who had been told by his oncologist that he had 6 weeks to live because cancer had spread significantly to his entire body. It started in his prostate, but then it spread. 6 weeks to live. He got radioligand therapy. 12 months later, the same person is still on tour. He's still alive. I'm not implying that every person responds in the same way, but this is a treatment modality that gives patients hope. CAR T, I spoke about CAR T in the space of oncology earlier on, but we are exploring treatment modalities whereby CAR T may offer the potential cure to patients suffering from B-cell-driven autoimmune disease. Most of you have probably heard about lupus. Most of you, or all of you, have heard about rheumatoid arthritis because we have family members, we have people we know who have debilitating joint problems, who are on treatments with injections and so on, and these aren't working. So sometimes medication doesn't work for certain types of rheumatoid arthritis, or we all know about multiple sclerosis. It's very common in Ireland. We have one of the highest prevalences in the world. various very effective treatments for it, but not a cure. So CAR-T offers potentially a hope for these patients. So there's multiple trials underway, so there's a lot of hope about this treatment modality. Finally, for this slide, small interfering RNA. I don't know if anyone has heard about it. It's a natural body switch-on, switch-off mechanism. Our body is made up of proteins. Proteins control multiple functions in the body. Unfortunately, sometimes proteins malfunction. When proteins malfunction, it's very important, if possible, to switch off that protein. That's our natural response that the body very often employs. So it interferes with the production of messenger RNA for that specific protein. There's about 4 or 5. FDA website lists 6 of them. There's about 3 or 4 available in Europe now, typically used for cardiovascular conditions. The first one I think that came out was used for cardiac amyloidosis, and the other 3 are used for cholesterol, for high cholesterol. What's beautiful about these therapeutics is that they offer targeted approach. So there's no off-target effects very often because they're targeted to a specific organ where the disease thrives. And the good thing is that they are typically given 2 to 3 times a year. So no chronic use, no 355 tablets a year, 2 to 3 times a year, with the potential of achieving excellent improvements in signs and symptoms, and with a safety profile that's very often akin to injection site reaction, because they're typically given as subcutaneous injections, and very often that's the only side effect. This is a video from our CEO about radioligand therapy.
Hi everyone, I'm back with another explainer, and I want to describe to you today an exciting therapy called radioligand therapy, which has the potential to impact the lives of cancer patients. Now, radioligand therapy is building off what we've known for many decades, is that radiation can be used to kill cancer cells. But imagine if we could target that radiation with micro amounts to the cancer cells in the body. That's what radioligand therapy works to do. First, we have a ligand, something that can be taken up by cancer cells that's developed in our labs. And that ligand is connected to a radioactive particle, very microdose of radiation. When infused into the body, the ligand gets taken up by the cancer cells, and microdoses of radiation are then given to the cancer, killing the cancer cells. In this way, we can be targeted and specific in the therapy. But then, of course, the therapy then leaves the body. So it's an exciting new way to treat cancer. I'll look forward to providing you more of these explainers over the years to come.
So advanced therapeutics, I've probably explained classical conventional treatments, but advanced therapeutics are typically highly specific, very often tailored to an individual patient. They offer the potential of once-off administration. They offer the potential for cure. They have a sustained treatment effect, but the downside is that they're very often complex to manufacture. So they, as I said, they provide the opportunity for unprecedented long-term benefits to the patients, but are we, as a society, as a country, are we ready for them? So the challenges we face are listed here. So by 2050, our population is going to increase disproportionately from 8 to 10 billion. The number of over 50s is going to go up from 1 billion to 1.6 billion, and chronic disease is going to make up 80% of disease burden. In Ireland, our population will increase from currently 5 million to 6.1 million, and that's if we exclude any properly abnormal migrational patterns driven by political or economical migrations. The number of over 50s is going to go up from presently 1.5 to 2.1 million, and the chronic disease share of burden will be the same as the global one. So this will pose multiple challenges with respect to the adoption of advanced therapeutics. Advanced therapeutics need to prove their value. Most of them are around for a short period of time. As such, there is a lack of long-term data for them. pricing and funding challenges, we need to bear in mind that there is probably very often a high budget impact because there is an upfront payment, typically once off, so there is a once-off upfront payment. Patient identification may be a challenge because it might be very difficult to identify the right patient, and healthcare system challenges are also an issue because very often there is accessibility hurdles with these treatments due to infrastructure and capabilities within the healthcare system. So, as I'm getting ready to summarize, there's over 7,000 potentially transformative medicines in various stages of clinical development. These offer the promise to transform patient outcomes, patient lives. Is Ireland as a society ready? I'll focus briefly on clinical trials only. When it comes to trials, we're behind certain European countries of the same size and economic performance. I'm giving you the screen Denmark and Finland for comparison purposes. If you look at Denmark and Ireland, we have roughly the same GNI per capita as Denmark does, but Denmark, unfortunately for us, does 3 times more trials than we do. Denmark has done 2,400 trials in 9 years. We've done 654. We should be attracting more trials, especially because of the large scale of the pharma presence in the country. But not only because of that, because patients deserve early access to life-saving, life-changing medication. And very often, trials are the only vehicle that someone can get access to an experimental treatment for probably a life-limiting, for a debilitating condition. So a reform of the trial system in Ireland is needed to accelerate new medicines development and the standard of care. A few steps that have been laid out by IFA, or trade association, is that we need to standardize trial startup requirements and timelines for hospitals, to designate specifically clinical trial signatories for each hospital to have at least one clinical research nurse, to ring-fence the funding for trials in hospitals, and I have bolded this out. It's very important that we give clinicians protected time to do trials. This is no bashing of the healthcare system. The responsibility is shared between both the HSE and Novartis, and the pharma industry. This is because most of the trials that are conducted in this country, and it's the same situation worldwide, are sponsored by the pharma industry. But again, they are conducted in hospitals, so the responsibility is joint. So both the industry and the HSE should join hands. My final thoughts in closing. So the pace of innovation is fast and is accelerating even further. The sustainability of healthcare system, for reasons that I highlighted, is at risk. To ensure a sustainable healthcare system, we must improve the trial infrastructure in the state. We must invest more in preventative care. We must ensure our healthcare system is better connected. And if we decide to connect the healthcare system, to do our best to try and integrate artificial intelligence in the same while we're doing it. And access to medicines needs to improve. When I'm talking about access to medicines, I'm, in this instance, talking about trials and various other treatment modalities that will give the ones at greatest need early access to medications. As a country, we're uniquely positioned to be a competitive player in the global arena. We have proved this in multiple areas, multiple industries, so why not do it in this space too? I'll leave you with my final thought, and this is, can we make Ireland not a centre, but a country of excellence to do high-quality trials and to probably even get better than where Denmark is today? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Agron. I mean, the points you make are very good points, and particularly around clinical trials, it's always been an issue. Certainly something I heard about a lot on the Health Research Board. We're going in a very different direction now with the next presentation. It's an interesting patient story. So I'm going to invite to the stage Paul Nolan. Paul is the head of marketing in RCSI, but isn't here in that sort of position really, or on that context. He's here as a patient to tell his story. Paul has led the award-winning team of marketing professionals in RCSI since January 2020 and spearheaded their efforts through COVID. I've known Paul a long time, and he has an amazing story to tell, and I think it's very fitting that he tell us this story. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, William. Thanks.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. As Tom said, my name is Paul Nolan. I am Head of Marketing over at the RCSI University of Medicine and Health Sciences. It's really lovely to be here today. It's not so nice seeing the back of people's rucksacks on the way out the door there, but hopefully you can stick around for the next little while. And I know we've got some great speakers and presenters. So just as Tom mentioned, I work at at RCSI, and I have done for the last 13 or so years. I started out there as working as head of international at our surgery division, and in January 2020, I moved to a role as head of marketing for the university. RCSI is I guess, an international university that's headquartered here in Dublin. We have a very, very strong international footprint and focus. So for us, it was really, really challenging during COVID in terms of would international students be able to travel. And we had to dig very, very deep over 2020, 2021 to make sure that we ensured our students had a really excellent experience, notwithstanding what was happening in the hospitals and what was happening in other universities. And in the year since, we have really refocused our efforts there in terms of completely refreshing our marketing team and refreshing our focus. We've kind of moved out of that kind of really critical, acute phase. And I'm delighted over the last couple of years that we've launched a number of new strategies in terms of research, in terms of marketing communications, in terms of our approach to content marketing. And if any of you are on Instagram or TikTok, I'd really encourage you to check out our RCSI Student Life channel. There's some really, really lovely content there from our results awards last week, and we've got conferrings next week. So it's a really, really nice time of the year in terms of the academic calendar. And I'm really delighted that myself and my team are down in we'll be down in the Liberty Hall Theatre tonight. We've actually, for the Irish Social Media Awards, we have been nominated for 6 different categories there as finalists now. So we're hoping we'll get at least 1 or 2 bits of silverware to take home later on this evening. So you'll be delighted to hear that that's kind of not why I'm here. And I want to tell you kind of a very, very different story. I don't have any slides, and I think that'll be kind of pretty evident why I don't in a few moments. So I want to take you back to December 2022 and tell you something that happened to me on the 2nd of December 2022. It was a Friday, I had just finished work and had gone home, got changed, got my running gear on, and headed out with friends on a Friday night, we always do speed work down the track in Newbridge Athletic Club. And at about 8 o'clock that evening, we were pretty close to finishing our session. And completely unexpectedly, I suffered a massive cardiac arrest I had a massive heart attack, which caused a cardiac arrest, and I dropped dead. And dead I would have stayed, only for the fact that Lady Luck or Divine Providence or whatever it is was really, really smiling and shining for me that night. I dropped, oftentimes on a Friday we would have been maybe out going around the town in Newbridge or maybe up in the Curragh if it was during the summer. So where I dropped was only about 30, 40 feet away from a defibrillator. A really good friend of mine, Dee, isn't always out running, but she was there that night, and she had recently recertified in terms of for CPR, so she was able to start work on me straight away. And over the next 20, 30, 40 minutes, things were pretty hairy. But it's amazing the way the healthcare system kicks in. So when they rang the ambulance and explained what had happened, what that triggers then is first responders. So Newbridge Community first responders dispatch somebody immediately to the running club. So while Dee and the team were working on me with the defib and doing compressions, about 10 minutes after I dropped, literally within 10 minutes, there was a first responder on the scene there who was also jumped in compressions and doing kind of the shock treatment, if you like. And within about 10, 12 minutes then, there were 2 ambulances on the scene, and the paramedics took over at that stage. And so they worked on me on the spot for about an hour. I think I was gone. I've no idea what they were doing, but I think it was more CPR, more shocks, adrenaline shots, and that kind of thing. And I was taken to Naas Hospital, where they thought initially that I had a drug overdose, and seemingly that's actually pretty common. Guys my age arriving in, maybe not in running clothes, but having had drug overdoses. So my wife got a call from one of my friends in the running club to say, look, Paul's had a bit of a turn. They've taken him over to Naas. So she actually arrived at the hospital at the same time as I did and got an awful fright. And the first thing they said to her was, what's he taken? What's he taken? So she said, what do you mean? We think he's had a drug overdose. What's he taken? Now, anybody knows me, Tom, probably the person I know best in this room, knows now I might have the occasional glass of lager now, but that's about as wild as I get. So my wife was ringing my daughter to say, do you know, does Dad take drugs? And she was like, God, no, absolutely not. That's bananas. So I was admitted into Naas. They did an amazing job there over the next 24, 48 hours. I was placed into an induced coma while they did tests on me to try and figure out exactly what had happened. And about 2 days later then, I was moved to Blackrock Hospital, where I stayed for another 3 or 4 nights. So it was a really, really distressing time for my family. Obviously, for the first couple of days, they did the whole take them into the family room, give them the bad news that, look, this really isn't looking very, very good at all. So, I think they had more or less, kind of resigned themselves to where things could land. But the folks in Naas managed just to stabilize me. And I think just on the back of the fact that I was actually reasonably fit, that really, really stood me in very, very good stead. And over the course of the next 2 days, then they kind of took me out of the coma. And now, so what happens is when someone drops dead like that, you've got a window of about 6 minutes to make those life-saving interventions. I was incredibly fortunate in terms of the response from my colleagues in the running club, the response from first responders, etc. So the fact I was dead, it's a really strange thing to say, but the fact that I was only dead for 3 or 4 minutes really, really gave me a great chance in terms of recovering. Because what happens is when you're clinically dead, obviously, I'm not a medic now. We've got 2 people here who are, and they could probably explain it more eloquently than myself. But your brain cells start dying because they're not getting oxygen. So when I was admitted, with a kind of the heart attack, the cardiac arrest. I managed to pick up pneumonia along the way for good measure, and I also had a very serious hypoxic brain injury. So eventually, when I did come through in the hospital, my wife and my 3 children were there, and I kept saying to them, are my family coming to see me? Are my family coming to see me? And that was really, really very, very distressing for them. So I guess then things unfolded in a very, very, very positive way over the next couple of days. And I know the health service gets an awful bashing in the press and the newspapers, etc. And we hear an awful lot about, kind of things that don't happen that should, and things that do happen that shouldn't. But I got to say that the care that I received when I was critically ill And the care that my family received was absolutely amazing. And I have to acknowledge that the RCSI community really swung in behind us all. And one of my colleagues, Professor Arnie Hill, did an amazing job just in terms of coordinating the people who were looking after me, making sure I was getting the best possible care. I was transferred to Blackrock Hospital on the Sunday evening. I think the World Cup started the same week. It was a really weird week overall to see the World Cup in the middle of December in Qatar, and so I started kind of coming around on the Tuesday and the Wednesday, and starting to understand what had happened. And really weirdly, the whole of the week before the incident was completely wiped from my memory. Now that's probably got to do with the brain injury, but I think it's probably also a kind of a psychological response to what happened. And I was incredibly fortunate. By the following Saturday, I was discharged from Blackrock. And what they had determined, having had a number of angiograms, was that my left anterior descending artery was completely blocked in 2 places. And I was actually a really fit guy. I kind of good diet. I don't smoke. Don't drink a whole lot. I had done Dublin Marathon only a couple of weeks previous. I had actually gone and got a checkup only 2 weeks beforehand and got all my bloods done and got an ECG done. Like, I was looking after myself. And the only issue that they identified through all those tests was that my cholesterol was slightly elevated. It was about 5.5, which isn't off the charts by any means. And I spoke to my GP on December 1st, and he said, look, all your tests are absolutely top notch. You're in good nick. Your cholesterol is a little bit high. We're going to put you on a statin, but apart from that, it's all good. And I dropped dead the next day. So that's what happened. And I've always been a kind of a glass half full kind of person. I wouldn't have considered myself a lucky person. I'm not sure I really believed in luck, but I was incredibly, incredibly fortunate in terms of where I was when that happened. I mean, I didn't think I was particularly lucky to have it happen to me, but it was always going to happen to me, because what I didn't realize on the back of being adopted is I had a very, very high hereditary risk factor there, that I was completely unaware of, So in terms of getting better and getting back to normal, I was discharged maybe around, I think, the 9th of December. And I started walking when I was in the wards, when they kind of detached me from all the different kind of monitors, etc. I started doing loops of the ward. When I got home, I started doing a 5-minute walk twice a day, and then it was a 10-minute walk, and then it was a 20-minute walk. 2 days before Christmas in December 2022, I got the train to Dublin on my own and did my Christmas shopping, and just couldn't believe. It was just such a surreal experience to be around Dublin City and everybody going around their business and the place looking so pretty and Christmassy, and the world completely oblivious to what had happened to me. And I was just so grateful to be alive. And come January, I was back in work. I was back down the running club in January. I've started back just shuffling around the track, and then I was walking. And then I was jogging, and then I finally got back to running. I went back, I sing in Newbridge Gospel Choir, and that's a real source of joy and comfort, and it's a real switch off. I was back singing come February. I did a cardiac rehab class out of Naas Hospital, which is absolutely a really fantastic program for about 6 weeks. And it was interesting. I really felt like an outlier and an outsider until then. And then when you're in a group of people who've all had some sort of pretty significant cardiac experience, it kind of normalized it a bit, and it helped me to process it. But one of the biggest impacts I had was psychological, in that every time I went out the front door and closed it behind me, I asked myself, am I coming home this evening? And that was very, very challenging. But and I didn't know how to get over that, or I didn't know how to get past it. And I had an idea. I said it to my GP, and I said it to my cardiologist, and they both agreed that it could be a really good thing to do. So back the previous November, I had booked a ticket for the 2023 Dublin City Marathon, and I asked them, would it be okay if I walked that? So they both said, yeah, go for it, yeah. Just please, just take it easy, you know. So that's what I did, and I was down the back of the marathon group. And I don't know if anyone's ever done a Dublin Marathon or been on the sideline supporting people who do, but it's a really, really incredible experience. And I was down the back of the people doing it, and there was all sorts of shapes and sizes and people doing it for different reasons, and folks with pictures of loved ones on their T-shirts, etc. And I was just so grateful to be there, and I was so in that moment. It really felt like a kind of a pilgrimage of sorts, and from then, that whole anxiety in terms of I used to call it the shut the front door anxiety, that went after that. And, you know, kind of, again, I'm a glass half full kind of person. You know, kind of, it's amazing. Sometimes life lands something on your lap that you really don't expect, or maybe you don't deserve. I had suffered an awful lot with episodic depression before I had that event. And I don't know if it was a chemical thing. I don't know, was it just that I'm so happy to be alive, but I haven't had a single depressive episode since. Again, I often try to turn adversity into opportunity. So I've spent a lot of the last 6 months doing radio and press and TV and talking about this journey that I've been on, and asking people to be heart healthy, asking people to be aware of their diet, be aware of exercise, their alcohol intake, to be aware of hereditary risk factors, to be careful when exercising, because I don't know how many times I've heard of people just literally dropping on a rugby pitch or on a golf course or on a running track. And I've been kind of saying to particularly guys my age, I think we're, folks call us mammals from running around the place in Lycra. Look, you've got to be really, really mindful of putting your heart under pressure. I know what happened that night down the track. We were absolutely given it socks. And I certainly wasn't maybe running the way, if I had to take a bit of responsibility for something, I wasn't running the way a responsible 52-year-old should have been running. So I wear a heart monitor all the time when I'm running now. And that gives me a lot of comfort. It means I can just relax and enjoy my run and just keep my heart where it should be. And it's really important that people are aware, if you're a cyclist or a runner or you're into intense sports, you should really be aware of what your own maximum BPM looks like, you know. And so just I two messages just for this group to say, look, I think stress is just an everyday part of our lives, and there's no getting away from it, you know. And I know I had an awful lot of stress in my life in the run of this happening, and I know that was a very big contributing factor in terms of what did happen. You know, kind of we'd been through the pandemic, we had the kind of a lot of stress in work. Kind of when things kicked off in March 2020, I had a daughter in leaving cert year, I had a son in junior cert year, I had a daughter in sixth class, and they were all really pivotal moments that got messed up and disrupted. So and we had a lot of sickness in the family. My wife had a major operation the year before, and then even getting sick in 2020 caused an awful lot of stress again, you know. So it's stress is just the gift that keeps on giving, and we need to be mindful of it, and we need to try and manage it in ourselves, and we also need to try and help our family and our friends and our colleagues manage it in themselves. And just the final thing I wanted to say was just again a huge thank you to all the doctors and the nurses and the allied health professionals and the healthcare managers and the scientists working in the hospitals and the cleaners and everybody in the healthcare system. They did an amazing job looking after me. They did an amazing job looking after my family. And I know every day those people are changing and saving lives, thousands of lives around the country. And they often don't get oftentimes we're too fixated on the bad news stories to acknowledge that. So if there's any healthcare professionals here today, I just want to say a huge thank you to you for the work that you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well said, well said. So what can you say? An amazing personal story from an amazing fella. And I'm just so glad that he was willing to share it with us all. You know, it is a huge issue. Young, middle-aged men dropping down, left anterior descending coronary artery. I got a call one night to my first cousin in a small rural town in Ireland, same age as me, in fact younger than me, whose wife was pregnant with their first child at 1 o'clock in the morning to his house, who died from the same condition. So it's a big problem, and it's certainly something that needs further addressing in our health system. And Martin O'Driscoll, our next speaker, is going to talk a little bit about calcium cardiac screening. Martin is a radiologist in the Mercy University Hospital in Cork and leads the radiology group there, and he's a senior lecturer at UCC. He has trained across the world, came back, was in Colorado and Denver, and came back to Cork, obviously the true capital of Ireland. And I'm delighted to welcome you to the stage. Thanks. Well done.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So it's kind of hard to follow that, isn't it? Very hard. I mean, it's an emotionally charged room, and it happens to coincide with the fourth anniversary now of the death of my first cousin who was out cycling. Again, our age, had done 120k the previous day, was having a tootle around Cork and dropped dead in front of his friends on his bike. Mm-hmm. He was within 4 kilometers of CUH. He was given CPR and defibrillated within 90 seconds of the event because the nurse happened to be driving by, and he didn't survive. So I want to consign all those stories to history. That's why I'm here. I'm here as an advocate for change, okay? My day job, I'm a radiologist. I'm a general radiologist in a very busy hospital. What am I not? I'm not a cardiologist. I see a very eminent cardiologist was here recently. I'm not a statistician, and I'm currently not a clinical researcher, although I have been a clinical researcher. I have lots of shares in retirement portfolios, none relevant to this discussion, and I take inclisiran, which is made by Novartis, but that's just coincidence. Small messenger RNA. So, what am I? What are you? So these are 6 questions, audience participation. I want you just to ask yourself each of those 6 questions, and in a minute, 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you to put your hand up if you scored 1 through 6. So how fast can you read? Everybody read those questions? Okay, so who got 1? Gave themselves 1 out of 1. Who got 2 out of 2? Who got 3 out of 3? Who got 4 out of 4? Who got 5 out of 6? And the top of the class? Healthcare professionals mainly. Okay, so we're going to have a quick journey through what those questions mean and what they don't mean, which is what the important bit is. We're talking about an epidemic. We need to look at coronary artery disease as an epidemic. The World Health Organization recognizes it as an epidemic. Put it in context, 20 million deaths in 2021 from cardiovascular disease. We freaked out about COVID, which killed 7 million as a once-off event. This is a recurring carnage every year in our departments, in your department, everywhere. We all know somebody who's been touched by cardiac disease. The economic burden is estimated to be close to $1 trillion in 2030, which is only 5.5 years away for the US. $1 trillion, the direct costs, not the indirect costs, not the human trauma, not the psychological costs, the actual costs. And it's a bigger problem in countries with lower incomes and middle incomes than it is here, where it's about 75% of all deaths. WHO has 9 voluntary global targets for member states with the lovely aim of reducing cardiovascular deaths by 25%. I want to reduce all cardiovascular deaths. And how are we going to do that? I'm going to show you in a minute. So Ireland is a small country, but we have 10,000 deaths per year. I'm from Cork. That wipes out Cove every year. That wipes out Ballina every year. That wipes out Skerries every year. It takes out Sandymount, about 10,000. It takes about Donnybrook, about 10,000 people. That's an awful lot of people we're losing that we shouldn't be losing. 80% of these deaths are deemed preventable. I'd go higher than that. I'd say virtually all of those deaths are preventable. And the deaths are the tip of the iceberg, and it's a big iceberg. Screening. We're all used to screening. We all had a hill prick when we were born to screen for disease. The Guthrie test. We want to identify disease in asymptomatic people. We want to get him before he goes running and has a heart attack. We want to get my cousin before he drops dead. Can we do that? We can, of course. Why do we want to screen people who have no symptoms? Because we know the disease is there, but they don't know it's there. And we know we can either prevent, modify, or cure that disease. And the disease prevalence, you go looking for the disease in the population. We talked about Sniper's Alley. Excuse me. A lot of people are in Sniper's Alley now. And how often you screen depends on the disease, whether you're talking about cancer or not. What if, okay, what if in 10 years' time no one in Ireland died of undiagnosed and untreated atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease? That doesn't mean people won't die of the disease, but that he was not undiagnosed and not untreated. We can't cure everybody. The disease still kills people. Sorry. So what we want to do is not let the disease kill people. And what if in 20 years' time, those now aged 40 and younger did not have any complications of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease in their entire lifetime? So the drug that I'm taking, the drug that's at the cutting edge of disease modification, I believe that will become the standard of care, that the third-line therapy will become the first-line therapy in the not-too-distant future. And gene editing will then replace that when it becomes the standard of care, and we won't be talking about this disease in 50 years. I certainly won't. I won't be here in 50 years. I'm the wrong side of 60, but other people will be. So it's a disease, the narrowing of the arteries, the hardening of the arteries, and we focus on the brain, we focus on the heart, but I see a lot of peripheral vascular disease, people with amputations, aneurysms that rupture, also renal impairment, kidney failure because of atherosclerotic disease. We know all the risk factors. Can we prevent and modify the disease? Absolutely. Can we cure the disease? Potentially. The standard risk tools, so if you go to a GP, you tick all the boxes, I don't smoke, I don't do this, I don't do that, oh, I have a bad family history, or I don't know my family history. All those standard risk models, whether it's the MESA model or the modified MESA model, all these score things, lots of different huge amounts of research into how to predict who's going to die or have a heart attack. They fail to identify 75% of people who have no symptoms who experience future cardiovascular events. We underdiagnose, we undertreat, and we also overtreat. We treat people who actually won't have a risk of having a cardiac event. And key to this risk modification is the coronary artery calcium score. So coronary artery calcium score has been around for about 40 years now in total. We've got robust data, which longitudinal studies go up to 30 years now follow-up. If you've got no calcium in your coronary arteries, that's really good news. You have a 98% negative predictive value of having a major adverse coronary event in the next 5 years. If you have a second scan 5 years later that it's also zero, that pushes out close to that guarantee, if you like, that MOT goes out to about 10 years. It's a very strong negative predictor value. It's also a good positive predictor value if you're young, because if you're young, you shouldn't have any calcium in your coronary arteries. But I bet if you were scanned when you were 35 or 40, we would have found coronary artery calcification, and we would have changed the outcome for you. You'd never have had your heart attack. You can combine it with lung cancer screening. This is a superb physical specimen, for those of you who read quickly, who in 2013 had a coronary artery calcium score, which was zero. This is my left main coronary artery. This is my LAD, left anterior descending coronary artery. My circumflex coronary artery is going over there, and my right coronary artery is not in the picture. This is my breastbone. This is my spine. This is my ticker. This is me in 2020, a little bit older, not much wiser, and I got a little white dot here, which doesn't belong there. That's coronary artery calcification. Okay? We can put that in a nomogram, which tells you where you should be for your age. Express it as a percentile. On the left is a logarithmic scale, so it looks a bit weird. We can also tell what the absolute number is. We can come up with scoring systems. You do not want to look like this. This is one of my cyclist buddies who was at the top of the pile, and after about 2 years noticed that he was bringing up the rear. And I said, you know, have you ever been screened? And he goes, no. So we brought him in, and his calcium score, that's his coronary arteries mapped out in 3D. And he was where? He's so high up, he's so high up, he's not even on the scale. He ended up with a triple vessel bypass 2 weeks later. So, won't go into too much detail, but the more calcium you have, the more vessels that are involved, and the more proximal the vessels, the bigger the vessels, it's logical. These are pipes providing blood to your heart. The more that involved, the worse it is. It's an independent risk factor. In some studies, if you take all the other risk factors, put them together, and you take a calcium score, it's independently as good, if not better, than everything else we do. And that's borne out by the clinical experience. We can't predict 75% of the major events. I'm going to go a little quicker here. SCAPIS trial was a bunch in Sweden, Swedish trial. You probably know about it. The Swedes are healthier than us. They have a better diet. They're more outdoor. They don't smoke as much. They're not as overweight. They enrolled 30,000 people based purely on census data. They invited about 35,000 people to partake in the study. 30,000 people said, yeah, I'll turn up. Their only criteria was 50 to 64 years of age. They found silent atheroma disease in 40%, 40%. Now, bear in mind, a good screening study for cancer will find take breast cancer as an example, we'll find between 5 and 8 cancers per 1,000 people. That's a yield of 0.5 to 0.8%. And they found 40%. They found that it was more older women than men, by and large. They then went on and did an actual coronary angiogram in these people, a CT coronary angiogram, and found that a calcium score of 400 was associated with more than 50% narrowing in more than one major vessel. And the major conclusion was, we were surprised that atherosclerosis was so widespread. The disease is there. This is the iceberg. They found the iceberg in 30,000 people. So what if we screen with coronary artery calcium scoring? What if we put this in the front of all the risk assessments? What if we say tomorrow every 40-year-old male in this country will be screened in this year? That's 100,000 people. Sorry, males and females. So it's about 100,000 people in each age bracket between 45 and 65. We get them early. Why? Because we can do something about it. We can absolutely change that outcome for them. The health budget is 23.5 billion. They've already overrun by another 500. Who cares? It's all money. But we concentrate on disease in this country. My life has been spent dealing with disease, not preventing disease. The tools are available now, right this minute. We're using technology that's been there since the 1990s with electron beam CT scanners, the modern CT scanners. You lie down, you breathe in once, the machine recognizes who you are. You breathe out, you breathe in again. There's no needles, there's no injections, and you breathe out. You walk out. That's it. It's a 5-minute test. We want to be proactive in this country rather than reactive, just like with the smoking ban. We are world leaders in some things. We should be a world leader in this. And I absolutely believe that today's high-tech therapies will be the first-line therapy in the future. My inclisiran, my once every 6 months injection, that'll be the norm until the gene editing comes or until Novartis give me one that says, you only take it once a year or you take a pill once a year. And I'm sure they're working on that. Who are the stakeholders in all this? You are. You know, I love the phrase, I'm interested in the future because that's where I plan to live. But with our shifting age demographic, we don't want to be the crippled 80-year-olds. We want to be the 80-year-olds who are out playing tennis, playing golf, windsurfing, kite surfing. We want to be active, we want to be healthy, and we want to be there. We want to get to 80. So the stakeholders are the Department of Health, the HSE, the GPs, cardiology, radiology, private health, and life insurers. Life insurers should be asking you to have a calcium score. They absolutely should. It's nuts, they don't. Okay? And the employers, pharma, biosciences, you and I, we're all stakeholders in this. Thank you for your attention.
Good man, well done. So there's a compelling argument there and a call to arms, and it's great that we actually have this year's charity partner the Irish Heart Foundation here, so I think it's very appropriate. Our last speaker in this group is Dr. Robert Bart, who's the Chief Medical Information Officer at UPMC. He received his medical degree in the University of Hawaii, the lucky man, and training at Duke in pediatrics and critical medicine. Dr. Bart formally started working in healthcare IT in 2000, while at the faculty of USC, that's in Los Angeles. And in 2007, Dr. Bart moved on to his role as CMO at Cerner Corporation. And in 2012, he was the first CMIO for the Los Angeles County Department of Health Services. And then he joined to Pittsburgh and joined, that must have been hard, changing the weather, moving from Los Angeles to Pittsburgh, where he now pursues his present role. And I welcome him to the conference.
Thank you so much for a great introduction. Hopefully you can all hear me okay?
Yep, perfectly. Yep.
Great. Thank you very much. So I think, artificial intelligence has been something that I think a few of us or many of us in healthcare have known about for quite a few years, but it wasn't really until October of 2022 when ChatGPT entered sort of the everyday walk of life vocabulary that bringing artificial intelligence into healthcare in a substantive manner became a significant reality. And with that, I think that what I've seen here in the US, and as I've compared notes with many colleagues across Europe, it's about 50-50. About half of the healthcare systems are running sort of as fast as they can into artificial intelligence. And about 50% of the healthcare systems that we see here in the States are very hesitant into adopting it into their framework of how they deliver healthcare. So with that, I'd like to sort of give a little bit of background, I think, about how to think about this and doing it in a very safe manner. And interestingly enough, I found these guidelines in late 2019. They actually come from a European Commission around artificial intelligence, on ethics and trustworthy artificial intelligence. And to this date, I still haven't found anything that what you'll see in these next two slides that really captures in a more concise manner how to think about trustworthy AI and then how to think about bringing it into a healthcare system for either care delivery or use by clinicians in the process of delivering care. But first off, it has to be lawful. It needs to respect the applicable laws and the regulations. And as we know, they tend to vary by the governing bodies of where you are delivering care, which country, which entity. They also need to be robust. And most people, when they think about technology being robust, they only think about the technical aspects. Artificial intelligence also has to understand and incorporate the social perspectives that are very relative and pertinent. In addition, they need to be ethical. I mean, one of the guiding principles within anything that all of us do within healthcare is around the ethics of healthcare. And we need to make sure and ensure that the tools that we bring in are also respectful of ethical principles and values. Similarly, what are some of the trustworthy requirements? And these 7 were defined by that same commission that I mentioned earlier. So human agency and oversight. We need to be respectful of fundamentally of the human rights. The other piece that's important is the humans need to be in control, right? So it's particularly true when you're trying to think about should artificial intelligence be used as an aid to a clinician in the process of delivering care. And we want the clinician to govern it, not the AI to govern the clinician. As I mentioned, robustness is important. This includes resiliency to attack, cybersecurity, all of those other constraints and things that we think about with other aspects of technology, but we need to make sure that it's there. The other piece that's important is it needs to be reproducible. I don't know if you're like me, I've leveraged sort of utilizing ChatGPT and trying to work with it and understand it. One of the things I've done over the last 2 years is asked it a series of the same questions. The answers that I get back have actually migrated over those 2 years. So you need to understand that sort of intellectual drift that occurs. Now, that's also true as humans. Frequently, our opinions and thoughts about patients and other things also do drift over time as we learn more things. But you need to make sure, is it learning something or is it changing for non-educational or learning reasons? Privacy is important. We need to respect privacy and data governance. And I certainly have spent some time over the years looking at the EU and some of the guidance that I think in many of the European countries that have to relate with privacy of information. I actually believe that your set of countries, including Ireland, actually lead much of the world in how you think about data privacy and governance. And I think there's a lot to learn there, and it needs to be very built into how we view artificial intelligence. That similarly extends to what I would refer to as transparency, or is referred to. And that really is about understanding the traceability of the algorithm, but also having transparency into the data set that any algorithm or use case has been built upon. And I'll touch on that a little bit later in this presentation. Diversity, of course, is important, non-discrimination and fairness. Actually, as recently as yesterday, it probably doesn't surprise anybody in this audience, but Yale did a study and they found that ChatGPT has racial bias. Now, if you know that ChatGPT is trained on the internet, that's probably not a surprising concept, but they fundamentally were able to define it and document it. And I think that's important that artificial intelligence tools are utilized in a manner that is truly non-discriminatory, in the same manner that we try to affect care on the patients we take care of. Societal and environmental well-being, these are concepts related to sustainability, environmental friendliness, impact to society and democracy. So these are, I think, important concepts that need to be articulated within the framework of artificial intelligence. And of course, accountability. We have an expectation in the professional practice as a physician or a caregiver that we are accountable for the decisions that we make. We also need to make sure that the tools that we use are auditable and have the ability to help be accountable within that professional use. So one of the things that we set about as we've adopted artificial intelligence into how we either deliver care or how we interact with our patients here at UPMC was establishing a policy. Now, I am not one for lengthy policies, and you'll see I've actually taken snippets of our actual policy and the three real main paragraphs within our policy, which is a total of about 5.5 pages. But the actual substantive manner, the 3 points here, ethical, regulatory, and technology and operational standards, they make up less than about 3/4 of a single typeset page. The first one on ethical considerations, that I think is one of the most important things that we as clinicians need to make sure that artificial intelligence actually takes into account and really is considering and how we apply its utilization within healthcare. It's part of our professional practice, part of our professional responsibility to make sure that the tools have the highest standards of ethical considerations embedded within them. Similarly, there are regulatory obligations. My obligations in the state of Pennsylvania in the United States may be different than those of you who are in Ireland or other countries within Europe. And you need to make sure that they align to the regulatory obligations of your agency or agencies that are governing that. That is something that we take very seriously here. And we align our policies. We don't artificially set our policies up to be more stringent than the regulatory obligations. We try to mirror the regulatorily required obligations within our policies. And then the last is they need to fit within the construct of our technology and operational standards. And this is particularly important as it extends to data and data access and use within artificial intelligence. And I'll touch on that in a subsequent slide coming up. But as you can see, these are three very short 2 or 3 sentence paragraphs that are the substantive portion of our AI policy. The goal of our policy was really about, we did not want to stifle innovation, but we also wanted to make sure that what we were doing was safe and ethical from a number of different fronts. In establishing a governance, we pulled together a group of individuals, and some of them on this list are the ones that I'm sure many of you would bring to mind. But one of the first people I called was actually someone out of our population health group who works predominantly on making sure that UPMC is meeting the needs of the LGBTQ societal population, as well as making sure that we are treating all the socioeconomic classes in a very effective and fair manner. I wanted that person representing how we think and how we utilize artificial intelligence within the care delivery processes here at UPMC. Risk and compliance, I think, as well as privacy, are self-explanatory, is why you would want them in a governing body, as well as along with the information security and architecture. Research and development, UPMC has a long history of developing some of its own internal solutions, whether it's artificial intelligence or otherwise. And that is part of the reason I wanted them involved with our governing body. And then we have domain experts. For example, the gentleman who was on prior to me was a radiologist. I have a radiology expert who around artificial intelligence and imaging, who is a domain expert that works with us. We have some that are within other aspects of care delivery. We have a pathology person who works with us actually in the imaging analysis that pathologists use. And so we bring them into this group depending on the topics that we're covering on any governing session that we're having as a group. Next, I sort of wanted to spend a moment on what I focus on as it relates to artificial intelligence. And value is probably the single most important thing that I focus on. And the reason I bring that up is I had a conversation with our CEO, Leslie Davis, probably a year or so ago. And I said, here's the truth about artificial intelligence. We can spend $100 million on artificial intelligence and have nothing to show for it. And what I meant by that is the people that reimburse us for the care that we deliver, they don't really care whether we use artificial intelligence or not, right? So we actually have to understand what is the value to our patients, what is the value to our clinicians that these types of tools are bringing in. Value is always not a financial number. Unfortunately, all too frequently within healthcare it is, but it needs to be something that really adds to the care delivery process, improving the outcomes of the patients or the efficiency and effectiveness of our clinicians. Data is another one that I spend a lot of time wrestling with. And why you need to pay attention to it, two reasons. One is I can pretty much guarantee you that those of you who represent health systems in the audience, there are clinicians that either you work with or within your system who are probably putting at least, patient information without patient-specific aspects of who they are into tools like ChatGPT to see what type of rendering or opinion those prompts might pull out. And you need to be thoughtful about the use of that data and making sure that it's secure and private and how it's being used. And you need to be also thoughtful about when you're partnering and working with vendors. For example, point of care ultrasound, those handheld wands have become somewhat popular here in the US. Most of the companies that have that would like those images to go to a cloud storage that they control. Those images are then being used secondarily to train AI algorithms on imaging that they're trying to create. And for those reasons, I think it creates a bit of a challenge. We actually challenge most of these companies that we don't allow them to actually extract our images into their cloud. We keep them on premise or in a domain that we can control so that we are in control of that data, not losing the ability to manage and maintain the privacy and security of the patients that we need to take care of. And then transparency is another area I spend quite a bit of time on. If you know a bit about artificial intelligence algorithms and whether those are pre-generative technology or now in the generative AI technology, when you are talking with vendors about, we like what you're doing, we're interested in leveraging your tool within our care delivery process, you need to ask them to give you access to their original test data set. You need to understand the demographics of that data. You need to understand how that population they created the algorithm on differs or is the same to the population of individuals that you deliver care to. That will give you an idea and an understanding of potentially any inherent bias, either for or against the population that you care for. I have found that vendors They are not reluctant to share their algorithm. They are reluctant to share the data set that they tested and developed the algorithm on. But I think as healthcare practitioners, we need to really press the vendor community to really be open and transparent about that, because it will give us better insight in how to actually utilize their tools within our care delivery. Here, I want to give you sort of 3 groupings of examples that will sort of demonstrate those points here. So at UPMC, we've got some home-developed risk algorithms that we've created. We've been using them for a number of years, somewhere around 5 to 6 years for length of stay and risk of readmission. They're created on our own patient population, our own patient data. We control all of the dynamics of the technology, and we control the learning model that we've utilized to create that. We use them as a predictive tool that helps our hospitalists and others who take care of the patients in the acute care setting understand what the predicted length of stay is and what the risk of readmission for that patient is, were they to get discharged at this time. And that provides value to our organization because it lets us understand and helps us understand what is our opportunity for bed utilization, what is the cadence of admitting patients, and then also how much monitoring should we dispense on a given patient that is going to be discharged. Frequently, much of what we do in the hospital is not going to decrease a person's risk of readmission because they may have a very high chronic disease burden. So then it becomes what we do in the ambulatory setting that actually decreases that risk. And this has helped us really tune into that to serve that patient population better and to actually hopefully meet their needs within their homes better than having them cycle back into the hospital frequently. Another example is we were a very early adopter of a stroke imaging algorithm. It was FDA approved. This was in late 2021, early 2022. The value in this one, and all of you who are clinicians, you know a bit about stroke. This is something where time and minutes and seconds actually matter. And with the stroke imaging algorithm, it was able to help our neurosurgeons and neurologists who do stroke call have a much shorter time to decision-making of intervention for the appropriate treatment for the patient in front of them because of the imaging analysis that the algorithm provides. That actually is a huge boon into our patient population, as you can imagine. As the intent to treat decision, the shorter that time frame is, the more of the brain that potentially can be saved. And then another one that we've been working on is in the ambient AI space. And that one actually has more value to our clinicians who are delivering the care as far as making them more efficient. In the US, there is a significant burden on documentation related to the visit in the clinic or the HPI, the history of present illness that's done on admission, or the daily progress note. There's a fair amount that goes into those documents, both from a medical communication perspective, but unfortunately, a fair amount of that has to do with the communication of the appropriate types of information related to appropriate reimbursement from the payers. And so we've embedded 2 ambient AI solutions that use generative AI to help our physicians and advanced practice practitioners be much more efficient in their documentation. Something that we track a lot on the average clinic physician. So primary care physician goes and see patients from, let's say, 8 a.m. to 6 in the evening, goes home. It is not uncommon for some of our physicians to spend a couple of hours each evening, we refer to it as pajama time, catching up on the documentation of the patients they've seen during the course of that day. With these ambient AI tools that are helping them do much more thorough documentation in near real time, we've been able to decrease the pajama time significantly. And in fact, in many instances, our physicians are not having to do after hours documentation on their medical charts. That actually improves the life and the daily amount of stress it decreases that those physicians and advanced practitioners have, and allows them actually to have better work-life balance. It's not something that necessarily translates into better reimbursement. It's not something that necessarily translates into an improved process within the clinic, although the feedback we have gotten from patients is that they enjoy the engagement with their physicians and APPs a lot better. So, but it is something that once we've instituted and those that have adopted it, they truly report that they feel like some of the joy in care of medicine and the practice of medicine has been returned to them. And that's one of the concerns I have as we've sort of corporatized healthcare, that there's a little less joy for us who are clinicians in the process of it. And this is actually a tool that actually is helping return some of that joy to the practitioners. With that, I'll leave it. One small fact here. I'm a huge fan of football. Before I moved to Pittsburgh 7 years ago, I lived in Los Angeles. And I'm still a big fan of LA Galaxy. One of my all-time favorite players is from Ireland. It's Robbie Keane. And that is not just a photo of a jersey. It's actually a photo of the jersey I own, because I've followed his career even before he got to Los Angeles. But I wanted to leave you all with that fact. And I thank you for your time and attention.
Thanks a million, Robert, and it's a great story at the end. And it's amazing to hear how a big organization like yourselves are using AI. Can I just ask, have you done that in partnership with some of the bigger players, with the Microsofts, the Googles, or how have you gone about that? Yeah.
Yeah, so we're a pretty sizable partner at UPMC with Microsoft.
Yeah.
We work with them. We don't do very much with Google.
Sure.
And I will state quite bluntly, Google understands security, but I don't think that they understand privacy as it relates to healthcare. And so most of our corporate interactions are with Microsoft. A lot of our development interactions are with AWS or Amazon.
Okay.
Almost non-existent with Google, because I think not just myself, many of my colleagues across the US have concerns with how Google interprets privacy.
Yeah, yeah, and a fair observation. So just in terms of, I don't know, did you hear the two previous presentations of the two previous speakers?
I did. The cardiologist and I mean the radiologist and the patient advocate. Yeah, I did. I did hear them.
And can we have your observations on that discussion?
Well, I think, first on the patient advocate, I caught about the last half of it, but his observations, I think, really captured the challenge that we all went through with the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that healthcare is dramatically different today than it was prior to the pandemic, at least in the U.S. And to be quite honest, many of the U.S. healthcare systems are still, from a financial perspective, still emerging from that challenge.
Yeah.
It was a pretty big impact. Not just to people, but to the practitioners and the systems that support those practitioners. But at the same time, I think a lot of good things. We've simplified sort of the entree of the digital aspects of patients and consumers and accessing our healthcare systems. I think that we concentrated on trying to lower the barrier of getting information from healthcare systems through the pandemic. And I think that has proved to be sustaining and sustainable, and something that I think the patients and consumers really appreciate.
Yeah.
The radiologist who gave his presentation wouldn't know this, but I myself have had some coronary artery disease over my lifetime, and have gone through some of those challenges. I completely agree with his assessment and thoughts around it. One of the things I will say is we are actually working with a couple of companies here in the US around some artificial intelligence interpretations and usage, because I think one of the comments he made around we are potentially over-treating a certain population of people. That's one of the areas where I think we need to get a little bit better on. And I think that some of the tools that are being developed will help provide better guidance. The second aspect I would add that I think extends some of the thoughts that he had is that some of the recent research with the GLP-1 medications would support that, you know, and I've had this conversation with some of our cardiologists, so I might say something, hopefully it doesn't offend any of the cardiologists in the audience, but I think cardiology has really sold itself on the cholesterol part of the injury and disease process. And I think that one of the things that GLP-1s are starting to teach us is that chronic low-grade inflammation processes are as important in the contribution to coronary artery disease. And I look forward to us having another type of tool set at being able to help patients, because I do agree. This is somewhere in the pandemic epidemic range on a consistent basis, but we treat it as part of daily life.
Yeah. No, look, thanks for those observations. Agron, do you want to add anything, having heard the two stories?
No, I mean, with I heard Paul's, I suppose, first talk, and yes, myocardial infarctions, chest pains, and everything else can happen, even when your cholesterol, even when your LDL is normal. But that's why you need to have a comprehensive test. And I would fully support the ambition that Martin spoke about, calcium scoring. But then again, it needs to be done in a sustainable way whereby the HSE can afford it. And then at the same time, I mean, selfish, because money is being spent left, right, and center. Because on a population health level, this would probably give us much more than some other interventions with probably questionable outcomes. So absolutely, yes. Not as a treat. I mean, people in this country get tested for colon cancer after the age of 60, I think. So why not add this in the routine, I suppose, panel of tests that every adult should avail of? But we could probably start with the ones with a family history, because those aren't included at present. And probably if we show that the impact is meaningful, then why not expand it to the entire population after a certain age, probably 40, 50, for me and you, and probably if someone has a family history, definitely test them. Familial hypercholesterolemia, definitely test them earlier on. Slovenia has a fantastic testing for a rare form of high cholesterol, for familial hypercholesterolemia. They test school children at the age of 5, because that's when we start seeing sort of build-up of cholesterol. It's a genetic form of cholesterol build-up. And these people usually, if untreated, they'll have their first heart attack probably at the age of 20 or 30. So if they find FH in those patients, then they proceed to cascade screening family members, because the chances are high that someone, their siblings or their parents, may have it. So we need to do much more in the space of cardiac screening.
Yeah, and Paul, obviously, you know, you've been on this journey and you've obviously told your story, as you said, on the radio, and I heard it and it was so eloquent. Have people come to you and said, oh, you know, I have a story like that? How many other stories like that have you heard?
Yeah, a lot of people have come up to me and kind of said, well, look, I had similar to yourself, getting in touch. I had a cousin that this happened to. A lot of other people have come up and just said, you know, kind of, I brought my kids to the GP and my GP said to me, who are you? And they said, well, I'm these boys' dad. And my GP said, well, how come I haven't seen you before? So I think that idea of being proactive, getting into your GP once a year, what's to be afraid of? I suspect, and I'll say this, it could be a little controversial, but I think a lot of the time women are better at looking after themselves physically than men are. And there's also, I've had one or two people come up to me and say, well, you know, sure, I don't even have a GP. You know, I'm kind of, and it's almost a bit of a macho statement. And I'm thinking to myself, God, what a gobshite, you know. How could you be proud of that? So yeah, but I think again, risk-based testing makes a huge amount of sense. But prevention is so much better than curing. And I think the point to make is that this is a lifestyle disease. You know, I mean, there's obviously hereditary risk factors, but a lot of it is that we live very sedentary lifestyles now.
Yeah.
We sit in our cars a lot of the time. We eat a lot of processed food. And what worries me is I think down the road, I think back in the 50s and 60s, smoking, no one really realized how dangerous smoking was or the impact that it had on heart disease. And I worry now in terms of the impact of vaping. In 20 years' time, will we realize that's kicked off another epidemic in terms of heart disease?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, you know, obviously, do you want to add anything, Martin?
Well, you know, one of the barriers all the time in Irish healthcare in particular is, you know, we can't afford it. And I would counter, we can't afford not to.
Yeah.
It's not for my generation. That horse has bolted. But, you know, the healthcare dollars we will save, you know, looking actuarially, if we stop 40-year-olds from having coronary artery disease, strokes for their lifetime, okay, we might put you out of business. They won't need statins. They might need inclisiran. They might need aspirin. But there's harm from statins. There's harm from aspirin. So if you are a chain-smoking, out-of-control diabetic with bad lipids, who doesn't exercise, who's overweight, but your calcium score is 0, you still have a 98% negative predictive value of having a major adverse coronary event in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing as powerful as that. So how can you justify putting that person on aspirin, risking a cerebral bleed? How can you justify putting that person on statins, potentially getting a myositis? You know, the risk-benefit ratio has to be balanced. And also, the problem is we're trying to get somebody to spend money now to save money later.
Yeah. So I think, look, to wrap up, I think the purpose of Martin and Paul speaking today is really to begin a national dialogue around this issue. You know, it's something that we all feel passionately about, that there should be a national screening program for these people. I know it's a conversation we'll take up with the Irish Heart Foundation. And perhaps, Robert, you might talk to Robbie Keane about joining the campaign. Yeah.
I would love to.
Yeah. So just to recap on the day, obviously we started the day with Fran Thompson and pretty much saying, look, we have a strategic plan from the department. We know what we need to implement in terms of the digital plan for the country. We're open for business. Patients are at the centre of it. You know, we know we need to innovate. We know we're not good at innovating. We know that the regional element is a way of going about implementing. When you approach us, and the timing of your approach is really important if you're a vendor. We spoke about new hospital design and the hospitals of the future, and that was an interesting discussion really about the latest tools and approaches to both design and innovation, but also to really about supporting the IT infrastructure within that. We had some really good discussions around digital technologies and around how they're implemented, and saw some good examples in Saudi Arabia and other places of how ultimately, if you're lean and you don't have procurement challenges, you can just push ahead and do all sorts of innovative stuff without those challenges. And equally, how important it is to get it right, and that the problem you're trying to solve is a problem that fixes a real life problem for clinicians and patients and makes a real difference. And we've heard from some of the technology companies around the little, I suppose, opportunities there are to integrate and provide real technology solutions that solve real clinical problems. And some of those companies were really interesting. And then, most interesting, CUMH, a little island of innovation down in Cork, where a bunch of people really were willing to push on and innovate. And what's been interesting is people have come, and I was approached in the corridors by a few people who said, you know, we're talking to them because we want to do a trial, or we want to do something because they're open for business. And this discussion has been an interesting discussion around the challenges there are in coronary artery disease specifically, but all the stuff you talked about, Eoghan, was just so fascinating around where drug discovery is going and how really the science is changing. It's so fast, and AI is really having a massive impact on that. So really, I'd just like to thank all of you as a panel. I'd like to give you the next year's dates already, 28th and 29th of May, if anybody's that sort of person who puts it in their calendar today. And really just thank everybody here for being so supportive and sticking with us for the course of the day. And to everybody who did the organisation and the team here at the event, and the support team at InvestNet. we'd like to thank everyone on your behalf. And thanks, and have a great evening. Thanks. Oh yeah, I don't have it. Oh, sorry. There is a draw for the prize. 3 names, okay. Paul, you can read them out there. You can do the honors. Is this for the first prize? The first one's for first prize. Yeah.
First one's for first prize. It's Damien Donahue, Nordic Global.
Okay. We have someone who'll take it, yeah.
You have to give it to him, though, yeah?
They'll look after you there. Thanks.
Thank you. Second prize is John C. Dooley, Bond Secures Health System. John C. Dooley. And third prize, this is a cuddly toy, box of chocolates. Mairead O'Riordan, Clinical Director, Cork University Hospital.
Oh, yeah, that's good. That's great. So, thank you, everybody. Thanks a million.
Good to meet you. Yeah.
Meet you.